Awesome. Well, good morning, Brad and Kara.
Good
Good
morning, or
morning.
for some folks, good afternoon.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
right.
It is the lunch hour on the East Coast right
That's
now.
right. I
So
feel like I should be eating something in solidarity with my East Coast friends.
you can join me for a little coffee if you'd like. So
Well,
that should be
all Brad and I have is water. We're
We
pretty
do.
boring here so far this morning.
there you go. There you go. Well, I'm excited to hang out with you guys, and I love technology. Just so you all know, and the studio audience, we don't really have a studio, but I'm looking this way sometimes just because that's where I have my questions queued and stuff like that. It's not that I can't see you. It's just that that's where I have my external monitor there too. So. You guys, I'm really excited. I'm excited that in just about 6 weeks we get to hang out in Sacramento, and then in another month and a half or a month after that we get to be in Atlanta together for NYWC, and you guys are going to do a intensive there, and I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit as well. But we are here gathered today to talk about not just Sticky Faith Family, but just kind of even the nuts and bolts of the behind the scenes. This is the new book in the series, the Sticky Faith Movement, and it's based on 7 years of research. Can you guys kind of give us a little background on how you went about the process of that research and how the whole movement got started?
Yeah, yeah. Well, first off, I love that you call it a movement, and it gets us excited to think about this is something way bigger than our team
For
and our
sure.
efforts, but really something we feel like God's been doing among churches, among youth ministries around the country and beyond, and that's really what got us started was concern, not only among ourselves, but from youth pastors who came to us and said, we see the kids walk away from our church, walk away from youth group after high school, and walk away from God. And what's that about? And so we looked into it some more, found that some good research out there shows that about 1 out of every 2 young people walks away from God and the church after high school, which was astounding.
Yeah.
So we launched this project. We looked at over 500, we tracked with over 500 young people who were all part of youth groups in high school and tracked them for 3 years. We also have been working with over 100 churches really intensively over the past few years. And then for this latest project, we did a follow-up interview study with 50 families. And Kara will share a little bit more about that, specifically about the book. But all of that kind of coming together is giving us different perspectives on what helps young people develop lifelong faith, which is a goal that we all have
Yeah.
in youth ministry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this being the second book written for families, what makes this different than the first?
As families read the first book and devoured it, what we heard from parents is this is fantastic. We need even more ideas. And I think we who are youth leaders, we understand that parents need practical tips, things they can do as they're driving their kids to school, as they're getting ready for dinner, as they're saying goodnight to their kids, as they're dealing with their high school students who are withdrawing from them, maybe even rebelling from them. And so we received a grant that allowed us to interview 50 amazing families from all over the country and learn their best ideas to put the kind of research-based principles we were unearthing into practice. And I got to say, Brian, and I know this is true for Brad, our research on Sticky Faith has so changed my parenting. My
Mhm.
kids are 13, 11, and 8, and every day the way that I interact with them is different because of our research. And it's just been a joy to be able to share that with parents directly as well as with youth leaders who can turn around and share it with parents.
What I love about this new book is that for somebody that hasn't read the first one, you're able to kind of keep them in the loop, bring them back up to speed, and so it's obviously we want people to get every book in the whole movement, and it's going to inspire and everything. But I think that you guys do a great job of weaving some of the stuff that came out in the first book. Just as I read it over the weekend, one of the things that just kind of hit me was this whole idea of those that feel close with their own dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
That it's like 41% or something like that don't feel close with their dad. There's like a 50% likelihood of them walking away from the Lord, or maybe it's even more. And those that 75% that felt close to their dad stayed with their faith, and just thought, man, I love daddy-daughter dates and daddy-dude dates, as I call them, with my 3, and try to do that. So I felt affirmed, in some of the things that Elizabeth and I are really trying to do. So thank you for affirming those that are really making efforts. I would like to know just kind of what's some of the encouraging feedback that you guys have gotten from those around the nation that have been part of your seminars or read the books. What's kind of the most encouraging things that stand out to you?
Well, I'll tell you maybe one story. We get stories every week, but I'll just choose one because for me it's very much personally encouraged me. I was speaking about Sticky Faith here in Los Angeles to a group of parents, and a mom came up to me who was about my age, so in her very, very young 40s. Very young 40s, actually not as young anymore. I'm kind of now in the middle 40s, but anyway, she was in her young 40s, and she said, my closest friend heard you speak about Sticky Faith 2 years ago in the Bay Area here in California, Northern California. And one of the research-based principles that we teach is that every kid needs at least 5 adults who are on their team, 5 adults who know their name, who are praying for them, who show up at soccer games and piano recitals. And so this mom in the Bay Area was really struck by that, this idea that each of her 3 sons needed 5 adults who were investing in them. And so she and her husband talked to their boys, the 3 sons, and the 3 sons each named 5 different men who they wanted to grow closer with. And so this awesome mom and her husband started 2 years ago going to each of these 15 men and saying, will you invest in our sons? Will you be on our sons' team? And without exception, all 15 said yes. And that took about a year to get this amazing group of men to surround those 3 boys. And so that was about a year ago. And right about at that time where these boys had this amazing team of men, was when this mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And it's those 15 adults who are walking through the terrible chemotherapy process with these 3 boys. And it's those 15 adults who are going to be partnering with this dad to invest in these boys, especially if the Lord chooses not to physically heal this mom. And so that story stands out to me because for one thing, it shows not only the power of Sticky Faith and this intergenerational team that kids need, but the power of a youth leader to impact a parent. It happened to be me who said to a room full of parents, hey, your kids need 5 adults. But the youth leaders who are watching, the way that you help parents be the best parents they can be and not feel like they're alone, but know how to invite other adults into their kids' lives. We have a whole chapter on that in the new Sticky Faith book. Youth leaders have such powerful leverage to influence families. So that's why I love that story.
Yeah. Brad, you got anything that kind of stands out or just kind of an amen to Kara's there?
Yeah, well, absolutely an amen to that. And I was just thinking about, I'm getting ready tomorrow to fly to Michigan and speak with some youth workers. And, the youth pastor said, I really hope that you can help me help my volunteers understand how important it is that they partner with parents and that they see parents not as adversaries or not as a necessary evil, like we have to think about how we're going to deal with parents, but that they really see parents as partners in their kids' faith development. And I think the more we can just champion that, that's just one aspect of Sticky Faith, but I think that's one of those ones along with these intergenerational relationships. But, it's been so encouraging to hear from churches and youth pastors in particular about how much they really want their team to get it, how much they want the parents in their church to get it, that we want to do this together, and we can no longer see youth ministry as an island unto itself in the church.
I'm so glad you mentioned that about partnering with parents. I was thinking as you were talking, Brad, about a conversation I had over coffee about 6 weeks ago with a youth leader, junior high leader, full-time at his church, super dedicated, gifted with kids. I've seen him interact with kids, and he's amazing. And so we were talking about partnering with parents, and I started to think, his definition of partnering with parents, I think, is different than mine. And so I finally said to him, what do you mean by partnering with parents? And he said, well, we have all these needs in our ministry, like we need food and we need rides and we need some adult supervision, and it would be great
chaperones.
Exactly, chaperones. It'd be great for parents to know how they can contribute to our ministry. And I thought, well, you know what, that is like number 10 on my list of what it means to partner with parents. And the first and most important way that we can partner with parents as youth leaders is to help parents excel in their own spiritual nurturing of their kids. And and it's the whole idea of orange we were just talking about in a meeting before, the yellow that's the light of Christ partnering with the red that's the heart of love in the family. Church and family coming together so that kids can experience the most robust and long-term faith possible. And so I think part of what we need to do and what this book tries to do is help youth leaders know how to truly partner with parents, not just get them to sign up to bring pizza at youth group next week.
Brian, are you still there? Did we lose him?
Oh, I don't know. He looks a little frozen.
I
thought he was just really contemplating.
Speaking of frozen, this is a time I think for us to burst down in
right.
song. We both have daughters as well as one son, so we can do a whole Frozen montage.
I can pretty much repeat the whole movie.
Yeah, favorite
I love it.
lines. We can
I have
do all
no
that.
idea.
Oh, back! Oh, you won't see the Frozen.
All of a sudden, I started saying, "Let it go, let it go."
Let it go, let it go.
Sorry about that, and it took a while for Google Plus to respond to me by saying I was frozen too. So I was thinking you guys weren't. So
nice.
Apologies there. I guess my network connectivity went down there for a second. So I'm sure your answer was a great answer, though.
It was life-changing. I think a lot of people have come to know the Lord. Jacob is now going to follow Jesus because of our answer. So
YF has been praying for him for years, and so
this is the day, August 21st.
Yes. So one of the things that I loved where both of you were going with that, and it's really practical for me because as soon as I'm done with this call, I'm going to get in my car and I meet with a network of guys, a couple different networks, but my Southwest Seattle one meets and every Thursday at 10 and meet to pray, fellowship, be together. And this has been such a consistent topic for us and is parents. And so I would love, and this is kind of off script, just reaction to what you guys have just been said. What are a couple practical tools? I want to talk especially for that young guy and gal, 23 to 26, that don't have kids, maybe married. How do they begin to partner with parents when they naturally there's kind of an adversarial role? Parents can sometimes be jealous of that youth pastor having the attention, or the young youth pastor sees himself or herself that way as I'm friend. So what are some practical ways, and maybe this is where you went even before I froze, but a couple tips for those younger youth pastors or those that have never applied that?
You know, I think the first thing that I would advise, and it'd be interesting to get Brad's response, but the first thing that I would advise is for that youth leader who isn't a parent to recognize that there's a lot they don't know. You know, when I wasn't a parent and I was doing youth ministry, so many parents, especially moms, would say to me, "Oh, Kara, you know, you just don't get it. You're not a parent, or you'll understand when you're a parent." And at the time, it kind of got under my skin, and I thought, "But I really care about your kids." But now I realize, you know what? There's a lot I don't understand because I'm not a parent. I don't understand how tiring it is to parent. I don't understand how much wisdom you need as a parent. And so, what I would say to a youth leader who's not a parent is identify a handful of parents who can be your kind of go-to advisory team. And maybe you only gather them once every quarter and it's over coffee and it's nothing even that official. Maybe you actually create something official. But either way, who are the parents who can be your sounding boards to talk about everything from schedule, you know, when should we do spring break mission trip given all the different spring breaks in our, you know, in the area where our church serves. Those kinds of questions, parents can be so helpful, as well as deeper questions about teaching and direction of the ministry and how to really engage parents. So I would say if you're not a parent, then start by getting just a small group of parents who can be your go-to advisory council.
Yeah.
What would you say, Brad?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Think through how much you're actually listening to parents and create space in your calendar where you carve out time to really listen to parents. And that might mean going to where they are. Yeah. It might mean meeting them on their terms at work, you know, or for lunch, or it might mean
going to a parent's office.
It might mean you don't dress in, you know, cutoffs and a tank top.
Right. Yeah, totally.
But to actually begin to listen. One other thing is, I always say to youth workers, the best way to a parent is often through another parent.
Yeah.
And, especially to a disengaged parent, but that in this case as well, if you're not a parent yourself and you're not really sure, then those couple of parents maybe that you're already comfortable with or you already have a relationship with, help them to help you. Like Kara said with that advisory board, but it may even just be one-on-one.
Yep.
Hey, you know me, and I know that you support me. Would you give me a couple of tips for how I can connect with some other parents?
Yeah.
Or show me where I'm missing parents. Because I found as a young youth leader, I had a couple of parents like that, and they would tell me things.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I didn't ask for it. But they would tell me, hey, when you do this, it makes parents feel this way.
Well, let me kind of transfer over to the parent side now. I'm a parent of a teen, so I'm cycling in as a 7th grade guys leader because I've got a 7th grade girl naturally, and so I want to disciple those guys.
keep an eye on those boys.
Exactly. But in terms of, for me, a 12-year-old, 10-year-old, 6-year-old, we've obviously had some conversations about faith, but I talk with a lot of parents, my peers, who's just honestly kind of struggle with, how do I have a faith conversation with my kid? And a lot of it is because they see their own weakness. I don't study the Word that much. I don't know how to pray. How do I engage my kid? So what are some practical tips that you guys have seen, applied yourselves, the research, so on and so forth?
Well, 2 thoughts come to my mind. One is we do these sticky faith cohorts where churches can walk through our research over the course of a year. And one of the big ahas is we've spent over a year with churches, youth leaders, and their teens, is how many youth leaders walk around feeling guilty about the parenting that they are or are not doing in their own families. And a lot of youth leaders, or at least multiple, have told us, I'm a better parent to other people's kids than I am my own kids. But we walk in our house after a long day and our child still hasn't emptied the dishwasher and we're still upset about the curfew violation last night. And so we don't have the patience and emotional reserves we do with our own kids that we often do with other people's kids. I think if you're feeling that way, then I would say it's good for you to admit it to yourself and think about, I think it largely boils down to emotional energy and how much emotional energy we are reserving for our own kids and making sure that they're not just getting the leftovers because we're so busy pouring into other people's kids. So that's my first thought.
Yeah. Another piece we found in our research is that parents tend to, when they try to talk about faith with their kids, it's interrogating with questions. It's, well, what'd you talk about in youth group? Well, are you reading the Bible? Are you, and you get all these questions that really just feel like interrogation. And of course, the developmentally appropriate response is something like, I don't know, or stuff.
Or distancing themselves from their parents,
Or, And so to help parents understand, A, that's developmentally appropriate, and it's okay that your kid doesn't have a whole lot to say about that. But then B, to realize that we found in research that parents asking kids about their faith is a good thing, but also connected with stronger faith is parents sharing about their own faith. And what we find we don't do as often is just talk about our own faith, and not to make it more than it is, but talk about what it actually is. Like, I was trying to pray this morning and I fell asleep during prayer. Like, I think it's good for a teenager to hear that from their parents.
Especially if their parent is in church leadership.
Right. So your own kind of highs and lows of the day, but even in your spiritual life with the Lord. Not that, it may not be appropriate to share every deep, dark secret with your teenager about your doubts about faith, but even sharing some of your own questions about God, about the Bible, about current events. And wondering about those things together, that when your kid won't share, giving them sort of snapshots of your own spirituality is really powerful.
I love it. Really good stuff. Hey, just so our audience knows, there's a lot of people watching online right now, and on that YouTube live stream, you have the opportunity to ask questions. We've got a couple experts who have done a ton of research, and so write in your questions. Jacob's processing them, and he gets them to us, so that I can ask them live of Brad and Kara as well. So get those questions in, and I'll ask a couple more, and we'll see if some questions come in for us to ask as well. I just love that, the last point that you guys are making. I try to make it a habit even in front of my kids. Like if I'm at Starbucks and come in on a Monday and the barista asks, how was your weekend? What'd you do? I'm so quick to talk about the Seahawk game,
Yeah.
but I'm not all that quick to say, oh man, I heard a great message yesterday from our pastor. You know, when I say that, the barista looks at me like I have no idea how to respond.
Yeah.
That's even modeling to my own kids that I'm free to talk about my faith in front of anybody, just like I talk about anything else that I love. You know, so that's one of the principles I'm trying to live out. So hey, you guys are going to be doing an intensive at NYWC, National Youth Workers Convention, as I mentioned before, in Sacramento and Atlanta. Can you guys give us a little sneak peek at what that's going to look like and maybe entice some people to sign up and be a part of that?
Yeah, first off, I got to say I love the new NYWC schedule. I think starting on Thursday, ending earlier on Sunday is going to work so much better for people, including myself, with flights and all that. So I just think that schedule is going to work a lot better. So our intensive is on that Thursday, and we have about 6 hours where we're going to be diving as deep into sticky faith as we possibly can. We're going to be looking at some of the topics that we've touched on here already, like how to partner with parents, how to help kids have the intergenerational relationships that they need. We're going to be looking more at our research on doubt, as well as how to involve kids in service. And probably the session that I'm most excited about all the intensive, emerges from our sticky faith cohorts as we've spent time with churches, is, you know, we can spend a lot of time on what needs to change, and that's really important, and that's kind of what we've done here in this webinar. I think an equally important but often tougher question is, how do we bring about those changes? How do we change church culture? Especially we who are youth leaders, who we're not usually, you know, the ones who are the primary determinant of church culture. We're kind of like the Peter Pan of the church's staff. And so maybe not necessarily the tour guide leading the way. And so how do you lead up? How do you lead your peers, etc.? So that's our very last session in the intensive, and in some ways it's my favorite because I think it gets into some of the toughest questions, not just related to sticky faith, but any change we want to bring about in our ministries or in our churches.
Awesome. We got a live question from Madison, and I think it's in relation to kind of talking to the youth leader, youth pastors that I'll even be meeting with later today. What if you have youth group kids, children that their parents don't want to take up the role of being a spiritual leader? Maybe their parents aren't Christians, and you are a youth leader, and you're trying to have that sticky faith conversation with those kids. What kind of a word of advice do you have for them?
I can start. Yeah, really good and a hard question, and we all have interact with parents like that, right? And you know, I think one thing for youth workers to remember is that even that parent who seems like they're disengaged from what you're doing, and maybe even in some ways seems disengaged from their child, for us to start by assuming the best of them, and assuming that, you know, number one, and I think it was Reggie Joyner who shared this with us on a cohort webinar with some of our churches, but you know, assume that they love their kid.
They do.
Assume that they want the best for them.
Yep.
And assume that they do care about their spiritual growth, even if they feel disengaged, and that there are probably some other reasons, some of them you may not even be aware of. And so I think if we can start by, even when we get frustrated, you know, to start by assuming the best and to recognize all that's on their plate, and recognize, yes, maybe some of their priorities are misaligned from what we feel like they should be. Maybe they're not willing to pick up that mantle. The other thing is to think about, just to realize that parents often feel like they're blowing it in so many areas, and the last thing they need from us is to put another heavy burden on their shoulders to say, by the way, you're also blowing it spiritually with your kid. And if we can think about ways to more gently come alongside and encourage them, whether that's just sharing resources with them, whether that's you know, resources maybe that can drop hints about how they can, how important they are in the lives of their kids. You know, I think often it's pairing them with other parents, and maybe it's parents who are farther along than they are spiritually that could help nurture them and help connect with them. But those are first few thoughts.
Yeah.
Those are great thoughts. You know, I would say also the churches that we're tracking with that are especially effective with parents are really sensitive to the parents' felt needs. Our church, for instance, is having me next month do a talk to parents on how to navigate time pressures. Because, I mean, when we ask youth leaders, what's the number one felt need of parents? They say busyness. And so I love that our student ministry team has said, let's offer training for parents and how to think about how they use their time and what to say yes to and what to say no to. So that's an example of being really sensitive to parents' felt needs. We were speaking on Sticky Faith in one city, and the church actually offered a spa night for, I can't remember if it was just moms or parents. And I thought, talk about really knowing parents' felt needs and maybe engaging people who wouldn't normally otherwise come to church. So I thought that was a very creative way to, again, just like we do with kids, try to understand kids in their terms. We need to do the same with parents.
Yeah. Did you teach or did you go to the spa night, Kara?
Luckily, I didn't have to choose. So.
We've got a couple of awesome questions, and I'm trying to streamline a couple of them that kind of speak to the same area. So while I kind of form that in my mind, I do have one here from Scott. Dealing with single parents. How does a single parent have a sticky faith perspective?
Yeah, great question. I'm a daughter of divorce, raised for a long time by a single mom before she got remarried to a wonderful man. So I certainly understand those dynamics, and we looked into that in these interviews that we did with 50 families. Here's what I would say to parents who are divorced is the principles are largely the same, but the way that they need to be manifested, it's kind of in bold, big, italic letters. So for instance, the power of intergenerational relationships. That's true for every family, every kid. But if you're a single mom or single dad, or for youth leaders who are interacting with single moms and single dads, it's all the more important that that there's other adults who can kind of step in and help fill a bit of that vacuum. So I would say intergenerational and that team of 5 adults, all the more important with single parents.
Awesome. Getting back to the youth workers, I think there's several youth workers that are online right now watching this because the stream of questions that's kind of coming in. One of them, Tony, asks, what does it look like to have healthy family times as a youth worker who's carrying the burden for many families, and how could you prioritize that as a overworked, whether it's a volunteer or a youth pastor, but carrying that burden, how do you prioritize that for your own family?
Yeah.
Well, I'm perfect at this, so why don't I go ahead and start?
We're so good at it. We have a really good answer.
Yeah, Tony, man, that's one of, speaking of felt needs, I mean, that's probably my number one felt needs, is balancing ministry inside the home to ministry outside of the home. And actually, I'm going to be doing a general session at National Youth Workers Convention in both cities, Sacramento and Atlanta, on this very question. And for me, I mean, I'll give you a sneak peek of what I'm going to be saying, is I think it boils down to understanding every time we say yes, we're saying no to something. So every time that we say yes to a ministry commitment or to our family, we're saying no to something else. And to have a group of people around us who can help us make sure we're saying yes to the right things and no to the good but not great things. I'm just all the more aware, especially as my kids get older, time is short, and if I say yes to too many other things, my kids get the leftovers. I'm the only mom those kids can have, and so, or will have, and so only I can do certain things with my own kids. And so for me, it's being prayerful and mindful about using the time God's given us and making our yeses to the best things and make sure that we're saying plenty of no's too.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with Josh asked the question. He started an 11th and 12th grade ministry on Sunday nights. 6th through 10th graders, they meet on Sunday mornings, but he's getting some pressure from the 11th and 12th grade parents saying that's interrupting with their sticky faith time. So again, going back to youth leader and parent interactions, what word of advice do you have for Josh there?
Yeah. The listening to parents piece is so important. It's a good example of sometimes we have really great ideas that as we implement them, we discover we're doing things we didn't intend to do.
Yep.
And it may or may not mean that he needs to change his program,
right,
but it does mean take those parents seriously and sit down and figure out, is there a good way to move forward on this?
Yeah, maybe once a month parents come so that it's parents and kids together, or maybe he shifts to only meeting every other week. I mean, every Sunday night, that's awesome, but that's a pretty big commitment for anybody to make. So So yeah, talking with parents ahead of time would probably help with some of that. But if there is a way, even if you're going to continue that weekly format, how can it be family friendly? Are there discussion questions that parents and 11th and 12th graders can talk over before or after? That the time with 11th and 12th graders on their own becomes family strengthening, not family eroding.
Yeah,
love it. Awesome stuff. And as I hand it back over to Jacob, Kara and Brad did not ask to do this or anything, but I want everybody out there to know that everything that they've just said basically has kind of been addressed in this in such practical ways. This book in particular just really gets to the nuts and bolts of practices for families. It even gets into what grandparents can be doing, and so I love it. It engages the entire family. So